Okay, everyone. So now we are learning the storage classes. If we talk about the storage class, then they are used to decide the scope of variable. To understand the scope of variable, we are taking one example here. Let us suppose that we are having a main program here. We are mentioning that is void main. In the main, we are putting the curly brackets. That means it is the body of main. Then afterward, we are having one function, let's say void Ankit. It is also having its body, so we are putting the curly brackets here. So there are two functions. One is the void main and one is the void Ankit. Now assume that inside the void main, I am declaring one variable. Let's say I am saying here int a. So here is one variable declared. And inside the Ankit, I am declaring one more variable. Let's say int b. Now here after declaration, I want to know that if I have declared one variable, let's say int a, which is inside the body of main, can I access this variable a here? Is it possible? That means inside the body of Ankit, can I access this? And I have declared the variable int b inside the body of function Ankit. And can I access b here inside the body of main? So this is the scope, means where we can access the variable that defines the scope. Or we can say that the declared variable is accessible in which portion of program, that is the scope. To understand where the variable is accessible, first of all, we should understand what are the types of scope. The first type of scope is the local scope, and the second category of scope is the global scope. In the local scope, we are having the internal variables. In the global scope, we are having the global variables. To understand the local and global variable, I am further extending this program. Let us suppose that here I am providing one more if condition. Let's say in the if we are having some condition and there is one more bracket. That means it is the portion. And here I am also declaring one more variable, let's say int c. So here now we are going to see what are the scopes of these variables. So first of all, we are discussing the first type of scope, which is the local scope. And here we know that we are having the local variables. Local variables are the variables which are declared inside the function. This function can be a normal function or a block. So first of all, we are going inside. We can see that here int a. So there is a variable we are declaring, and we can see that this variable is the part of function, which is void main. So here this is the part of function. Then further, if we see that we have declared one more variable, that is int c. So this is again the part of one block. So here we know that this is the if block, which is the part of some function. And again, if we talk about the int b, so there is one more variable which is declared inside the block, which is the part of void Ankit, which is a function. So here these all are the local variables. So we can say that a is the part of main, which is inside the body. So we can say that it is the local variable. Again, int c. C is the part of a block, which is if, which is inside the function. That is also called the local variable. Similarly, if we talk about int b, so here it is the part of function Ankit. So here this is the local variable. So these three are the local variables. The next thing, if we talk about the local variable, is that they are having the local scope or the limited scope. Limited or local scope means if I am declaring a variable in some block, the variable is only accessible in that block only. To understand more, in the example, we are assuming that this is the complete block of the if. Then afterward, we know that above we are having the main. So here where the brackets start, we assume that this is the block of main. Then afterward, we are having the function which is Ankit. So here we are having the one more block. So if we talk about the first variable which we have, that is the int c. Now here int c is the part of this inner block, which is the if. So can I access the C here? For sure, I can access the C. But can I access the C above that? No, it's not possible. Can I access the C in another block inside the Ankit? That is not possible. So we can say that C is only accessible inside the block where it is defined, and that block is the part of if. So this is the block which is having the local scope. Local means where it is defined. It is defined inside the if. So here it can be accessible inside the if. If you want to access the C anywhere else, you cannot access it. So this is the local variable. So we can say that its scope is local. So that is called the local scope. Local scope means where we are defining the variable, that we can access it. So we have defined the variable inside the if block. So we can access it inside the if only. Outside we cannot access. Further, we are taking the example of, let's say variable we are having is int b. We know that int b is declared inside the boundaries of Ankit. So this is the function Ankit, we have declared it. Can I access the b here inside that boundary? Yes, I can access. But can I access the b anywhere else? That means inside the if, can I access? No. Can I access inside the main? No. So that means b I have declared inside the boundary of Ankit. So here that means I can access only inside the boundary of function Ankit. I cannot access anywhere else. So here b is declared inside the Ankit, and b is also accessible inside the Ankit only. So it is having the local scope. Local means it is accessible locally. Locally means where it is declared, it is accessible only at that place. Further, we are taking the example of one more variable. Let's say we have taken int a. So here int a, this variable is declared inside the boundary of main. So here that is the complete boundary, starting here and ending here. So that means can I access the a inside the main? Yes. Can I access the a inside the function? Yes, because function if is also the part of main, so we can access it. But can I access the a inside the Ankit? No, that is not possible because a is declared inside the boundary of main. So whatever inside the boundary of main, we can access. So a can be accessed only inside the boundary of main. So that is called the local scope. Local scope means where it is declared in the boundary of main. So it can access anywhere inside the main. It can be the normal main or it can be the sub part where we are having the if. So there we can access the a. So this is the local scope. Where it is declared, that is accessible in that block only. Now we are discussing the second type of scope, which is called the global scope. Global scope contains the global variables. In the program, I am modifying and I am adding one more variable on the top. Let's say I am saying there is int d. So there is one more variable we are adding into the program. So here we can say that global variables are the variables which are declared outside the function. So here we can see that the variable d is declared on the top. It is not the part of main. It is not the part of any block, just like if, and it is not the part of any function, let's say Ankit. It is on the top, independent. So this is called the global variable or the external variable. But in the opposite, we are having the local variable, which are the part of function. So we can say that the local variables are the internal variable. As the global variables are globally accessed, means they are on the top, so anybody can access it. So we can say that they are having the global scope. What is the meaning of global scope? That means they can be accessed anywhere. So now we are learning the program here. In the program, we can see that int d, so that is declared on the top, that means these are the global variable. I am using the GV, that is the global variable. Now here, this global variable is globally accessed because they are not the part of any body. So that means, can I access the D on the top? Yes, we can access it. Can I access the D inside the main? Yes, we can. Can I access the D inside the block, which is if? Yes, we can use the D here. Can I access the D inside the Ankit function? Yes, we can use it. So here global variables are globally available. So that means everybody can access it. That's why they are called global or the external variable. And they are having the global scope. So here we can say that this is the global scope. That means everywhere inside the program we can access it. If we are going towards the different books, then we will find that there are different types of scopes available. But mainly there are two types of scope. One is the local and second one is the global scope. Variable which are the part of function, they have the local scope because they can be accessed inside the function or some body. But if I talk about the global scope, they are accessible everywhere. But as per some books, there are some different types of scope. The first one is the block scope. The second one is the function scope. And third one is the file scope. Now we are discussing these scopes one by one. So first of all, we are having is the block scope. That means they are the part of some block. We know that here we have already discussed one block, which is the if. So that if, inside that we are declaring some variable. So that variable is only accessible inside the boundary of that block. So that is called the block scope. So here the boundary where if we are having, so the variable we have declared is C, that C is only accessed inside the block here, which is of if. So it is called the block scope. I am representing the block scope with the BS here. So here this is the block scope. We know that this block scope we have already discussed inside the local. So we can say that this block scope is the one part of local scope. Then the next scope we are having is the function scope. We know that in this program we have made one function. That function is void Ankit. And one more function which is the void main. So these are the two functions available. Now here, if I talk about the void Ankit, in this function we have declared one variable that is int b. So this b variable is only accessible inside the function Ankit. So here we can say that this scope is called the function scope. Similarly, we are having one more function which is void main. This is the function and we have declared one variable that is int a. So here that variable is accessed only inside the body of main. So we can say that this is also the function scope. I am representing fs for the function scope. Here we have learned one thing, that function scope is also one part of the local scope. Afterward, we are having one more scope, that is the file scope. Here we know that one variable we have declared globally, that is the int d, and we know that this variable is accessed outside. It can be accessed by function, it can be the main, or it can be the Ankit function, or it can be the some block. So here the block which is if. So everywhere this D is accessible. So that means this is the file scope, means throughout the complete file we can access it. So we can say that this is the file scope. And we know that this file scope we have already discussed in the global. So we can say that block scope and the function scope majorly are called the local scope and file scope is the global scope. So as per the different books, you can find that there are the types of scope. Some books are saying there are local and the global scope, and some books are saying that there are block, function and the file scope. So it is totally up to you which scope you opt. But these are the types of scopes. So here we have learned one thing. The scope defines where the variable can be accessed. Majorly, there are two types of scope. One is the local and second one is the global scope. Now we are discussing that what this scope cover. That means what are the parts of scope. The scope contain two things. The first thing is the lifetime of variable and second thing is the visibility of variable. First of all, we are discussing the lifetime of variable. Lifetime of variable says that what is the time duration during which variable is active in the program. Now to understand that, we are observing the example here. First of all, the variable d is declared. We know that this is the global variable int d. So that variable is declared. We assume that in the memory, the variable d is declared. Let's say the address is 301. And afterward, we know that we are having is the void main. So void main is having the boundary. That means this is the part. So I am representing the void main with the boundary. Inside the boundary of main, we are having one variable declared, that is int a. So that means one variable a is declared. So here is one memory is allocated. Let's say it is 401, which is the address. Then further, we know that there is one more block, which is the block of if. So there is a scope. That means this is the portion. So I am representing that this is the portion of if. Inside this block, we are having int c. So one variable c is declared. We assume that its address is 501. We are having one more function here, which is void Ankit. We know that there is a scope. That means which is the boundary of this Ankit. So I am representing with one boundary. So here we have declared one variable which is int b. So b variable is declared and that is the, let's say, address we have given is 601. So we know that here we have declared the variables one by one. Once these variables are declared, then afterward these variables will be cleaned up. So that means whenever their task is complete, they will be cleaned. Now we are assuming that first of all, function Ankit completed its task. That means the variable b will be cleaned up. It will be deallocated with the memory. Then afterward inside the main, the block if completed its task, that means c will be cleaned up. Then further, main completed its task, that means a will be cleaned up. Then further, the global variable d, that will be cleaned up. So here we are putting a mark. That means after declaration, there is the cleaning up of the variable. That means memory is deallocated. So from declaration till the cleaning of variable, that means from the allocation of memory till the deallocation of memory, we are having one time duration which is called the lifetime. So whenever the variable was declared and when the variable was cleaned, that time gap is called the lifetime. Every variable has its own lifetime because we know that when the b was created and b was destroyed, in between there is a lifetime of b. So every variable has its own lifetime. Now we are discussing the next part of scope, that is the visibility. We know that there are two types of variable. One is the local variable and second one is the global variable. The local variable are visible or accessible in the declaration block. So we know that the variable c, which is int c we have declared, that is only accessible inside the boundary of if. We have declared the local variable which is int a, that is accessible in the boundary of main. Then we have declared one variable int b, so that is accessible inside the boundary of Ankit function. These are local variable which are visible or accessible in their own boundary, the boundary in which they are declared. We know that there is one more type of variable, that is the global variable. Global variables are accessible or visible throughout the program, everywhere. So here in the example, we have declared one global variable, that is int d. We know that this is accessible inside the function main. It is accessible inside the block, which is if. It is also accessible inside the function Ankit. So it is accessible everywhere. So that means its visibility is throughout the complete program. So here we have discussed that storage class decide the scope of variable. That means where the variable can be used. And we know that scope means where is the accessible, means where the variable is accessible, where we can access it. So scope is of majorly two types. One is the local and second one is the global. Local scope covers the local variable or the internal variable which are accessible inside the boundary only. Just like we have used int A, int C and int B. They are accessible inside their boundary. And then we have discussed the global scope which covers the global variable or the external variable. Just like we have discussed int D which is accessible throughout the program. And here, as per some books, we are having further types of scope just like the block scope. If we are declaring the variable just like int C inside the if block or some other block which is the block scope, then we are having function scope just like we have declared int A inside the main function or int B inside the Ankit function. So these are the function scope. Then we are having the file scope if we are declaring the variable globally just like int D which is accessible throughout the program. So this is the file scope. Then we have discussed what scope can cover, means what's come under the scope. It is the lifetime of variable, means what is the life of variable. When we declare the variable and when we clean the variable, in between there is a gap. That gap is called the lifetime. So when variable just declared and throughout its completion where it cleaned means deallocated with the memory, that is the lifetime. Then second thing under the scope we are having is the visibility of variable, means where the variable is visible. We know that if we are declaring the local variable, just like we have declared int C, it is local variable which is inside the boundary of if only, that is a block. We have declared the int A which is the local variable which is accessible inside the boundary of main only, which is the function scope. Then further we have declared int B which is accessible inside the boundary of function only, which is the Ankit. So here these are the local variables which are visible locally, means where they are declared. Then we have the global variable just like the int D, they are accessible throughout the program everywhere. So that is all about the scope of variable.